Hello makers and creatives, my name's Catherine Harris and I'm with Stitchery. And if you're new here, I do sewing and DIY tutorials each week. This week I had the honor of being a pattern tester for Porcupine patterns, and it was on their Valerie Wallet. So this is one of the ones that I made up here. I put a cute little wooden button on the front. It has instructions for a magnetic clasp. It has a nice little zipper pocket for your change, as well as room for 8 cards that you might have, and a nice generous spot for some cash that you might want to put in there. So I thought I would share a sew along with you guys, just in case you might be interested in making one for yourself. As a special gift to you, you can save 20% off just this week by using the code SS20OFF at checkout, and that's valid from January 25th, 2021 through to Friday, January 29th, 2021. I do not get anything off of this. It's just me getting you a discount on this pattern if you want to grab it in the first week of sales. Let's get to it. Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum. So to start, you are going to put the fusible interfacing on all of the pieces. Now the one that's a bit more complicated, I'm going to show you on screen here, and that is for the folds in our pocket where all the credit cards are going to go. So I've highlighted in yellow where those go on the pattern piece. You're going to fuse those on, and then to get the folds, you're just going to fold along the lines of that, and we're just going to flip it back and forth along here, and so you can see that I'm going along the top of that interfacing, and then we're going to give that a nice good press, and then we are going to flip it back over, and this is giving us a series of mountain and valley folds. And right here you can start to see where those pockets are lying, and so we're just flipping it back and forth as we go and pressing, and then folding it once more, and this is really forming those card slots. And you can see they follow exactly where they go on the interfacing. And on the last piece, you don't need to flip it right over because we're just going to flip it back and it's going to act as that back lining piece. We're just going to get that steamed nicely. And then I just like to give it one extra little press once I've got it all good here. And I'm just going to line that up to make sure all my pockets are even. And so I'm just showing you what that looks like. Then we're going to top stitch along all of the top areas of this to make sure that they lie nicely when we go to put our cards in. So let's pop on over to the sewing machine and get that top stitched. So over at the sewing machine, you're going to pull the other card slots out of the way so that you just have the one fold, and you're going to start with the one that's obviously on the top because it is the furthest away. And then you're just going to top stitch that in place, and you don't necessarily need to do any back stitches because this will all get caught up in the seams. Now then we're going to fold that one out of the way, and we're going to move on to our next one, and we're going to continue in that process. You're going to do that for both sides and then stitch down the sides just to secure those in place. So next we're going to place it on the lining piece in the wallet, and we're going to match up the raw edges with the card slots facing each other, pointing towards the center line here. Next we are going to pin that in place just so things don't shift around as we baste it in place. And when we put these basting stitches in, we want them to be within our seam allowance so that it doesn't show when we put the binding on. So we're just going to stitch all the way around here. And once we have that done, we are going to then add on the inner wrap. So we're going to place that on, and you can see that I've already placed the interfacing on this, and you've got the 1 centimeter seam allowance cut out on the interfacing. So you're just going to center that. And then we're going to pin it on the one side here. And then we are going to stitch down that side. So once it is stitched in place, it is going to look something like this. And a quick note, I did do mine on the opposite side than in the instructions, just in case you're following along in the instruction booklet. Next, we are going to trim down these edges so that they are nice and even, and we want to trim them down to the 1.5, the half a centimeter. And next we are going to press it so that it points downwards towards the flap portion, because this is what's going to create our binding. And if you have trimmed it down correctly, the backside should match up perfectly with the other side. So I'm just measuring that that is indeed half a centimeter, and it is. And then I'm just going to press it in place so it stays nicely. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch in the ditch just along here. So I'll just show this to you on the sewing machine here. So we want to make sure that our needle is going right in between those two seams where the binding comes around and our card slots begin. That way you don't see this top stitching and it's going to lie nice and flat for you. This is also the top opening pocket to where you're going to place your money in. So we want to make sure we have that top stitched. Next, I'm just stitching down here just to tack this in place, going along the side here as well, and coming down, making sure that everything is perfectly in place as we need that to sit nicely when we install the remaining pieces here. And so we're just going to do the top as well. And once that is done, then we're going to take this over and we're going to do the binding strip on the other side. So in order to do that, we are going to fold our binding in half with right sides together, and we're going to give it a good press because we want to see where that center seam lies. And then we're just going to open up our binding strip. And then we are going to place this on our card slot, and we're going to place it with the raw edges matching. And we're just going to pin it in place. And remember, this is on the long edge. And then we're going to pop over to the sewing machine and we are going to stitch it in place. Now I'm just measuring here to see that it is 1.5 centimeters from the edge where my center line is, and it is. And then we are going to stitch down that center line. So you don't want to use your regular seam allowance, you want to do that 1.5 centimeter line. Now the next thing that you want to do is you want to fold out the back piece away from the project, because you do not want to cut this off, because we're going to trim the middle seam allowances, but the two outer seam allowances we want to leave intact. So what we are going to do, and I am just figuring out how to do this here, you will see that I end up turning it over, because when you turn it over and press it down, it actually stays in place quite nicely. There we go. That was so much easier. So now that we have that in place, now we are just going to trim, and I am just measuring how much we need to trim off here. And it's about 1 centimeter that you're going to want to trim off, because you want to have 0.5 of a centimeter left as a seam allowance. Now, you'll notice that I trimmed off the 1 centimeter, but when I fold it up, I realize that it is not quite enough. So I needed to go back in. So rather than cutting off the 1 centimeter from the edge, I would suggest measuring out that half a centimeter from your stitching line, because that will get you the seam allowance that you want. So I'm just going in here and I am reducing that to a half a centimeter. And I'm very familiar with my measurements, so I didn't actually measure, but if you want, you can use your quilting ruler and measure that. Then when you fold both pieces back, you should have 2 pieces that are 1.5 centimeters and the inner piece being half a centimeter. And this will create our binding strip, and that is perfect because when we join these together, you're not going to have as much bulk within the seam, which is fantastic and just genius in how this pattern was drafted. And I'm going to give that a nice good press so everything lies nicely, so that when we put it together for the next steps, it makes things a lot easier. So next we're going to take the wallet inner piece, and I'm just going to match it up, and I'm matching up the raw edges on the side that is open as well as on the top and bottom of the wallet. Then I am going to pin it in place so that it doesn't shift when I take it over to the sewing machine. And then we are just going to baste it in place. We're going to baste the edges that are open along the sides there. So now that that's done, we've got our pocket where our paper money would eventually go. And you can see that was also interfaced, which you should have done on the very first step. Next, we've got the wallet inner flap. So there's an inner flap and an outer flap. That way, if you were doing a different lining as opposed to an exterior, you could change it up. So I'm just placing the inner flap on. And then we are just going to stitch with our regular seam allowance right across the edge here. And so once that is stitched, it's going to look something like this. And we are going to press it because pressing is king or queen. And so I am just pressing it, and I'm ensuring that my seam allowances are pressed towards the top or towards the point of that flap. The next thing that we are going to do is I'm going to mark out the 1 centimeter seam allowance from the edge because we are going to be putting in our zipper here. So I'm just measuring that on either side and marking that with some chalk. And then I'm going to measure that on my zipper as well. So I am just taking the same markings from the edge and marking where on the edge of my zipper tape I need to match that up to. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. That way I can have my zipper lined up exactly where I need it to line up. And just measuring from there where I need to measure into my mark and transferring that onto the other side of the zipper. And now I am going to trim my zipper down to size. That being said, you could trim your zipper down after you've actually stitched it in place, which might be a wee bit faster than doing this method, but hey, whatever floats your boat. Next, we are going to attach the zipper. So you want to place the zipper right side down on top of the pocket piece on the lining side here. And then I'm just folding the edge of the zipper teeth up and away so that it doesn't stick out into the seam allowance. And then I'm going to pin that in place, and then we're going to put a zipper foot on our sewing machine and we're going to stitch that. And you may have to move the head of the zipper away as you stitch. So I just wanted to show you this. So don't forget to backstitch because it is an area of tension. And then place your needle down and then move the zipper head out of the way so you can continue stitching along the rest of the zipper. And once that is complete, okay, so now that we have that done, now we need to add the pocket pieces. So we're going to grab the zip compartment lining pieces, and you're going to take one of those rectangles and you are going to sandwich that one piece on top of the zipper. Now, if you're quite ambitious, this could be done in one step where you place the zipper face down on top of the pocket and then place the zip compartment lining right on top of that and then stitch it all in one go. But it's a bit more precise doing it this way, plus you're adding a little extra durability around something that's going to get a lot of wear and tear. And so once that is done, it is going to look a little something like this. And then we are going to press that, and we're going to grab our pressing mat and our iron because we want to press this nicely, and then we're going to top stitch it. So you are going to ensure that it is facing the pocket compartment for the seams and not where the card slots are. So you're going to push it up towards the card slots here. And sorry, I set it backwards before, but yeah, it's going down towards the card slots, not towards the pocket. And then we're going to top stitch that in place. And it should look something like this. And then now we have to add the other side. So we're going to grab the front of our wallet piece, and then we're going to sandwich that with the zipper face down on the right side of the front of the wallet here. And then we are going to pin that in place, and we're going to do the exact same steps as we did on the other side, where we're going to pin it in place, move the zipper tape slightly away, stitch it, which will look like this. And now it's really starting to come together. And then we're going to add the other side of the compartment lining, and we're going to sandwich that in place. We're going to pin it and then stitch it just as we did before. And then just like we did on the other side, we are going to top stitch this side as well. So we are going to take it and press it to make sure we get a nice crisp edge. Then we're going to press it this way, making sure the pocket pieces are facing the opposite side, because we don't want to stitch those down because we want a usable pocket. So we are just going to press that down, and the pocket pieces are actually on the side where the card holder is right now. And then we're going to top stitch along that edge, and then it is going to look a little something like this once it is all done. Then we're going to press it in half because I want to find the center. And then I am just going to measure slightly down from the top to where I want my clasp to be. And there's the exact measurements in the pattern. And I am using these magnetic prong clasps, which are easily found. I think I got mine on Amazon. And so what I'm doing here is I am just measuring and marking where each of the prongs are, because I need to cut slits in the fabric in order to get the prongs in. So I am just going to cut very small slits in here, and then I'm going to place the clasp in, and I am placing the female clasp on this side. And then I have grabbed a little extra piece of woven stabilizer, just because there's going to be a lot of strain in this area, and I wanted a little extra oomph to stabilize that in my wallet. And I'm just going to press the clasps out, and it's nice and solid. Next, you are going to install the male clasp on the top of there. And then you are just going to measure the center, and from the bottom side here, we're just going to mark that, put it in place. And the exact same thing that we did on the other side, we are going to do here, where we're just going to snip it. And you'll notice this is a different fabric. I will explain later, just be patient. And then we are going to add some extra stabilizer. Now in this, I have some very thick stabilizer because there isn't a lot of fabric that this is going to go through. So I am actually using that really thick stabilizer that goes inside the wallet later on. And I found that to work quite well in stabilizing this. And then I am just taking some pinking shears and I'm just trimming that down to size. Now the pinking shears are nice because it creates a gradient edge, just because it is slightly thicker than the rest of the fabric. You don't want it to be big and bulky and see through that quilting cotton. And our clasp is attached. So next, after we have done that, we are going to start by stitching it together. So we're going to match up the zipper pieces first, making sure that they are pointed down towards the pocket lining piece and facing upwards so that it fits nicely. So you don't want them twisted or anything like that. Then we're going to pin around the perimeter of the wallet. And the nice thing about this is we don't have any of the interfacing in our seam allowances, so it really helps to reduce that bulk, making for nice crisp corners. Next, we are going to fold over the bottom edge of our pocket pieces, and we're going to turn that down about 1 centimeter. And we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So we'll just flip the wallet over and fold that down, matching up it exactly to the other side. Then we are just going to pin this in place because we still want to continue and stitch along the side seam. Now we are not going to stitch along that folded open edge because we need some place to turn. So we're just going to do along the perimeter, leaving the top end open. So this is what it looks like right now. Next, we are going to clip our corners because we want to help to reduce those bulk, and it will look a lot nicer and crisper in our corners when we go to turn it out. So just remove that excess fabric, and now we can begin turning it out, just being very gentle and very careful because there are a lot of layers and a lot of interfacing and stabilizer in there. So next, we are going to poke it all out. And then I couldn't find my point turner, but I found a broken blunt pencil. That will do just fine. We're going to poke out the corners in the triangle piece along the top. And the next thing we are going to do is we are going to press it, because when we press our wallet, it looks delightful. And you got everything sitting exactly where it needs to be. So please don't skip this step. So once it is all pressed, I am just going to put the pocket inside, and I'm going to poke out the corners and press the pocket as well because we want to get a nice crisp edge on that pocket. Now I'm going to pull the pocket back out, and you can see I'm just fixing the front of the wallet and just rolling it exactly where I'd like it to be. Now we have that thicker stabilizer, and this is a double fusible stabilizer, and it is used with bag making. So it's not that soft fleecy kind that's kind of floppy. It's very stiff, and it's got fusing on both sides. So once it is placed in there, we want to make sure it's perfectly down to the point, and then I'm going to check on the inside to make sure that it's not above that zipper line. We want it to be right on that zipper line. And once I've got it perfectly in place, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit it with a nice hot iron as well as some steam, because that is going to fuse this permanently to our wallet. And I'm just adding some extra fabric scraps that I had lying around just so I could get around that buckle. You will have a buckle on the other end if you did it correctly. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to close up our zipper pocket. So we're just going to pin this in place, and then we are going to straight stitch all the way down. And once that is done, we can pop our pocket inside our wallet like so, and then we can close our zipper. And our wallet is finished if you've already added your clasp. Oh, wait. You have to top stitch around the edge. That is optional, but I decided to do that because it gives it a nice, neat look. Now it would be finished, but we didn't add the clasp on this version, so we're adding it now. Now, certain clasps you can add. So if you're doing snaps and you had a snap that had a finish on the opposite side, then the snap would be put on now. But because I'm using purse bag hardware that has the little clasps that push out, you're going to see that on the front. But I have a solution for you if that is what you wanted to do. So right here, because we're going through so many layers, I had to use my awl to go through that stabilizer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to clip into it because it's just not big enough with the holes made from the awl. So I'm just folding it in half like we had done before, and I'm just snipping on the one side, and I will have to snip along the other side as well just to get it to go through because it is so thick. But it creates for a very secure clasp. So now you can see that on the right side of the fabric, and well, we don't really want to see that on the right side of our fabric. So I thought I would cover it with a very cute handmade wooden button. So in order to do that, you are just going to hold your button on. You're going to hide the knot underneath the button right here. And then we are going to stitch the button in place. Now, I have made both versions, and I actually found that this version, where it actually goes through all of the layers, including that stabilizer, creates a firmer clasp when it closes, and it actually sits nicer. Whereas if you did it the other way, when the top clasp doesn't go through all of those layers, it is a wee bit floppy. And now we have our finished wallets. And they look oh so cute and are ready for a day out. And there you have it. Now you know how to make your own Valerie wallet. Now I did want to mention one thing out. So I made two versions of them, and both of them I have the slot going on the right hand side. In the pattern, it is actually on the left hand side, and I don't know if I have maybe like a right and left dyslexia or something, but I am mixing those up, and I did it 2 times in a row, which is a little bit odd, but the pattern works both ways. So if you're following along on the pattern and you realize I've lined things up on the opposite direction, that would be why. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a big like and leave a comment in the description down below on what your favorite patterns are for purses, wallets, and bag making. Until next time, makers, let's get our sewspiration on.